What does it take to pursue scale in this decade, and what are the trade-offs involved? Here are success stories and, even more importantly, examples of failure. This is what you really need to listen to and learn from. We're getting an exclusive and a freewheeling conversation between Norwest Ventures' Niren Shah, Chiratae Ventures' Venkatesh Peddi, and Abhiraj, the co-founder of UrbanClap.
There were network effects on both sides, right? Restaurants signed up on their own because they thought their business was going to run away otherwise. Consumers signed up on their own. The technology worked. In fact, Swiggy initially started with phone calling, right? And we were like, why are we doing phone calling? Because the restaurants won't respond, right? So the food is like, the guy's waiting and the restaurant is like, needs a call to say, hey, you got an order, like wake up and start preparing it, right? So the challenge in a lot of countries, especially emerging countries, I feel, is that the infra is not ready, right? If you go too fast, right, then what happens is that, as Abhiraj said, the service lapses are going to be so high that your customers, going to blitzscale towards the door and run away, right? And more blitz than scale. So I actually feel that you'd be very careful about where to apply this. It's not as simple. It could be applied to even SaaS companies. We've seen some of our SaaS companies which are trying to go for a global mandate, go and get to every customer. And because they're in a narrow industry and they're worried that the 6 other players who are also there could do that. But they have a very robust product, right? And they feel that they're ready to expose that to the market and that the product will win rather than just service or people or sales or account management. So I actually feel that it really depends on the level of sort of that product market fit and the NPS or your customer centricity as you scale. If we had found even on Swiggy that customer service, and honestly there has been some failures, I'm sure all of us have had failed orders, but by and large Swiggy's NPS score is much higher than most others, right? And if we had felt that that was coming down rapidly, that scaling would have been toned down. And if we felt that it could have been maintained even at a higher pace, we did have the capital to even grow faster, right? So there is this kind of narrow band. You're driving your car very fast, right? And in India, I'll joke that it's a second-hand car you're driving very fast. And then you want to drive fast enough, but not to the extent where the brakes fail and the car falls down, So it's kind of that narrow thing. I don't think blitzscaling applies like in every country. The true blitzscaling, and by the way, I met the co-author called Chris Ye, not this guy, but so Chris was in town, and their view is very simple, that it's not, if you want true blitzscaling, like the book style one, where you're trying to grow like 6x to 10x every year for multiple years, that is going to be like a handful of companies with that kind of market expansiveness, as well as sort of that product which can scale that, and the timing. Right? Timing again for someone like Swiggy was very opportune. I've seen companies 5 years before saying that, all of us in Mumbai had seen a couple of these companies which used to deliver, and there was no real, market that point of time. So I think all of these factors.
Venki, you invested, just to add to that question, you invested, IDG and Chiratae invested in Myntra and Flipkart. So you have seen that blitzscaling happen at least as Flipkart, right?
Yeah.
So if you could just also bring that example, that'll be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want to sort of also add here is that blitzscaling and or scaling very, very fast. At least if I go by the question that you're asking and the kind of media attention that's been sort of getting these days, there is a negative undertone to it. Like, the people who believe that investors are sort of pushing the companies to really grow very, very fast and in the process make a lot of loss and sort of, die as companies, right? I really sort of feel very differently about it. Most of us as investors feel very differently about it. I think, the real question to ask here is, if you all are sort of practicing for a sort of say an Olympics, right, or a marathon. Now, there's no point in saying that, you should not try to run fast or you should not try to run long, right? Because there are few people who got injured. Of course, there are people who, while trying to scale fast, have also sort of seen the downside. But we've seen many companies where, scaling is almost part of a natural growth, where you're looking at, like Niren was saying, looking at the different business models, looking at different realities of what that business entails in terms of the infra available, in terms of consumer readiness, etc., etc. Like for example, Flipkart, we were not the early investors; we came in late. But in case of Flipkart, very, very clearly in the initial days, there were no real buyers that people in India will even actually buy online. I mean, right? So there was no infra, internet was sort of not really working properly. So at that time, to really imagine and predict saying that everything would have progressed this way is almost sort of next to impossible, right? But here's an entrepreneur who was sort of willing to challenge that and try and grow in as many ways as possible. And that led to innovation, like CODs, or starting only with books, and then sort of looking at different possible ways to grow in spite of the lack of infra, etc., etc. And the capital followed it. And the capital was utilized to make the consumer more and more ready to buy online, which was not the case. I mean, Flipkart was by far not the first one to try and sell online at all, right? But they're the ones who really survived, because at every challenge, when you're trying to grow extremely fast, and they've grown extremely fast, they try to figure out ways as to how to break, and which is where the balance that Niren and Abhiraj is also referring to, right? Where you're trying to figure out the practical realities, but not trying to grow fast is not a challenge, not a sort of question at all.
Just before, we have a lot to cover, but just before we go on to the sort of next topic here, I just wanted to ask if you have any other, we've heard Swiggy and maybe Flipkart is another example, any other shining example of an Indian company that's blitzscaled, and any example that you may have of one that has attempted it and spectacularly failed. That will be very useful for all of us.
So I actually think that a great example is PhonePe. Right? It's a company we almost invested in on the nth hour. Flipkart came and bought them out. But it's, Samir is the CEO. But if you see where PhonePe has reached compared to where they started, as compared to guys like Paytm and others, they really grew at a much faster pace than most of the other players. I mean, similarly, you just take even, why does it have to apply to only companies, but you just take UPI, right, as an India stack and the utilization of India stack. That is like a amazing example of blitzscaling on a platform level, right, where you just look at the usage, it's exponential, right, it's growing and again, I don't think they paid money, so the concept of blitzscaling does not apply here. It's more scaling than blitzscaling, because blitzscaling, what you're trying to say is that you grow so fast, because if you don't, the sort of negatives of not growing far outweigh the positives of growing but inefficiently, right? So obviously that doesn't apply to some of these. But I actually think that the payments platforms, whether it's Google Pay, a couple of these guys, just the kind of size and scale they've seen happened at a very, very dramatic pace, and that's still to play out. I think a great example of blitzscaling in front of you guys is going to be WhatsApp Pay, right? So I'm fortunately not invested in any of these, but I'm waiting to watch that play out in the newspapers or on the blogs. And when you guys see maybe a year or two later, if WhatsApp Pay is done well, please remember us on the panel. But that's going to be a great example. Another great example just in general is, the way WhatsApp has grown. And we've seen this it's so easy that in Korea you have Line, you have WeChat in China, but different people tried around the world to launch, they tried to launch Line in the US, right? Where sort of Facebook Messenger is bigger than WhatsApp. Right, and again, the network effects are because if I start on a new platform and nobody's there, right, then I go away. So this network effects is sort of the guy who's sending the message and the receiving the message. If you have enough people, it starts a whole flywheel. And again, that's why WhatsApp has crossed 2 billion users, and that's a great example of global blitzscaling. And they've spent a lot of money in the background. It's not like you don't see it in the papers every day. But in order, from their product to their security to kind of ensuring governments understand whatever, there's a lot of money they've spent. And it's a very strong business that once you're embedded there.
Then maybe one example of failure might also be useful.
I would say Line in the US, right? Line put a lot of money.
Anyone from India that you will think that had the potential, had the market, just overspent, just sacrificed efficiency and then ran out of money and business?
I'll think about it. The problem is it's not I can think of there was a company called Ask, which used to be like a horizontal e-commerce company. It was it called Ask? Yeah, it was Ask. I mean, Ask Me. That's correct.
Yeah.
So Ask Me was a good company. I think it started growing. It was the 6th player on the horizontal side. They were spending on both sides, getting good traction. But at some point, they way overspent, right? And I think they did not get the capital or whatever. I mean, we are not in it, or were not in it. But they didn't get the capital. And while they had started becoming the 2nd, 3rd company, I think that didn't really help. If they had got there, it would have looked amazing that they started going from, number 6 to number 3, and in terms of where they were headed in those few months. But when you run out of capital and you've not been able to prove anything, you're not proving loyalty or customer engagement or returning customers.
We've refused money. I'll just take a real example. Last year we raised, our latest round was a $75 million round, and the investor coming in wanted to pump all the money into the company. We didn't want to take all the money, because we felt that it would dilute us and we didn't need that much money. So actually majority of that round was, we facilitated a secondary for early investors. We could have taken all that money. I think it's a call. Like I said, when I started, every entrepreneur has to decide what is the journey that you're going to take. This is probably the only one. I don't know, building this one was hard enough. Maybe people have done it 4 or 5 times. For me, I think this is the one. So I better hold on to it.
So what you're saying is, if your post money and dilution is taken care of, you'll take the money.
No, I think it's about how you feel. I don't think there's a right answer. And I think, typically we want to look for quick answers in the right, but I think it's very contextual. You have to understand what your position is in the market. You have to understand if capital can be a differentiator. You have to understand if you need the capital or not. Generally speaking, if you don't need, it's important to have capital to sort of, so that you have enough for a rainy day. But too much capital, in my opinion, is not good if you don't need it. If you're not in a competitive environment, it can actually lead to bad habits, which can be very difficult to get rid of. Because if you have a lot of money sitting in the bank, there's no incentive to become profitable. You know that, you have so much in the bank, the teams themselves, lose that sort of killer instinct. So one of the conversations we had as founders, I remember this beautiful conversation I had with Varun. I said, should we take all the money? He said, nahi yaar, we lose the killer instinct. Let's refuse most of it. Let's take some. Let's get the investor to the cap table who's a good investor from a long-term perspective. But let's give most of this to the early investors. Let's not take too much. It's important to be a little bit on edge.
And I'll just add 30 seconds to this. We have raised 325 million of capital so far, and I can tell you with my own experiences that it's very important to have alignment. And just because money is there, taking it could be the worst mistake of your life, because if you're not aligned and they're trying to go south and you're going to go north, then I think it's going to be a very difficult battle. So refusing money, I think, is a great idea in general, because generally when you refuse, others will come in and pitch in even better terms.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, last question, please.
Hi, this is Amit Chaudhary here. I think I'm trying to coin this question for the investors on the panel. As an entrepreneur, I just want to understand few genres which we should be considering to solve some social issues or grassroots level issues, considering blitzscaling.
So, sorry, couldn't hear it properly. Genres
I want to understand at least 2 genres of problems that we need to address as an entrepreneur at the social level. At the grassroots level, I would put it. Yeah. Anything that you have in your mind?
So I have lots of ideas on that. I kind of like that whole market because we do a lot of financials and fintech stuff. So we think that is a big problem to be solved. People need finance to be entrepreneurs or just to run their day-to-day businesses. So getting that at a scale level and being able to solve, even after 200-300 years, we still have money lenders in India. That occupation needs to be sunset. So I think that's one. Second is, more and more I feel like health, right, at a mass market price. This is India. So are there ways to detect cancer? Are there ways to do, operations, stuff like that, where, and again, the beauty about that segment is scale is there. It's there for the taking, right? Like if you are able to develop a product which is unique, Actually, you don't need to do any blitz scaling there. It will scale on its own because we have 1 point whatever, 140 crore people. So it's not kind of that required. Thirdly, I think a big problem for India is jobs. So one simple way is start a company, employ people, because we got a lot of, and I really think that the service which entrepreneurs can provide to a country like India, which has this, we call it the burgeoning middle class and the young population and all that, all of these people need jobs. And that's the reason why I feel I'm in this space, because I really feel that the entrepreneurs, and I hope the government recognizes this more and more, are the ones creating jobs.